Just had Toni Caradonna on our show. He's the CTO of HLiquity and the owner of Swiss Coast AG. So quite a successful serial entrepreneur, and he's been active in the DLT, basically distributed ledger technology space, since 2014. And I'm really grateful to have him on today. And yeah, all I can say is really exciting episode around Hedera, stable coins in general, and what they are building on the Hedera Hashgraph. So stay tuned and please let me know what you think.
WaveAct, the web-free software company that understands what you want.
Hey Toni, you guys are building on the Hedera Hashgraph basically. Could you tell us a little bit more about the decision to build on Hedera and not on common blockchains?
So clearly, our ambition is to address enterprises with enterprise needs, and that has several implications. From small details like you cannot airdrop on Hedera, and I think enterprises really like that aspect, to quite relevant business enabling facts like trillions of transactions already done on Hedera, so volume really clearly is important. Also in terms of governance with the big brands, we mustn't underestimate the fact that humans are still social animals, and brands create also trust. And if you are a decision maker in an enterprise and you see, okay, these amazing brands that are in there are Google, IBM, Tata, Deutsche Telekom, just to name a few, Hitachi, and many others, that really creates the confidence for a decision maker in an enterprise to say, well, if I take this decision, it cannot be and the project doesn't take off or whatever, it's not because it's not validated by other enterprises. It must be other and it's not endangering my career. So I think that is a very very simplistic view on it. Why helping on Hedera helps, but clearly the biggest enabler is the numbers of transactions. Also because we have different theses that we assume to become true. We assume that foreign exchange, the biggest global market, will happen on chain at one point, maybe not 100%, but that there will be a shift, or at least on chain there will be a mapping of what happens in these markets. So then we need volume, clearly. And also finality, I think, what is it, 2.5 or 3.5 seconds? It's really something helpful. And last but not least, you cannot, there's no MEV attacks on Hedera. So that's a lot of factors that made us decisions really, it was clear when we looked at what would enterprises need. That's so a summary of some thoughts. And then on the other hand, we did a very intensive survey a year ago, where we looked at criteria if we want to have an on-chain Swiss currency, how does it have to look like? And a lot of the things that came out helped us in the decision. One point clearly also was that the carbon footprint should be addressed, and also that's something where Hedera is a very low footprint, and it's overcompensated. So basically, if you look at what has been decided, for example, in the European Union, where in businesses you have to do the reporting about ESG, and at one point, the reporting will also have consequences. That's also something that you mustn't underestimate, particularly for big companies. And we do see it in other projects where we help suppliers of big industry, small suppliers, a couple of hundred employees that are, supplying, for example, the car industry. And they say, well, we have to report. And if we have to report, you have to report, because otherwise we can't do our reporting. So these are important factors if you address enterprises as your target group.
What would you say was one of the biggest entry barriers to Hedera, or building on Hedera, basically?
There's a couple of things. I mean, in terms of finding engineers, you find a lot of EVM engineers with a big track record. Fortunately enough, we have, very, very smart lead engineer, who manages to do the transfer from EVM to the Hedera token standard. So we had to adapt stuff, but he mastered this very skillfully, and I think that's also something that, if Hedera really takes off, what we do think is it's good to have that know-how in-house and to have a good lead engineer with a team of engineers that can build other stuff. I mean, we haven't decided on our company strategy yet, but clearly this is just a starting point, and we will be building other stuff. In terms of entry barrier, the non-EVMness in terms of tech, that's a bit challenge, and the same is of course for the company that builds, or the companies that build front ends. Just to make clear, so we build software that someone deploys, and other companies build the front end, and clearly there's the same challenges. How do you connect the dots on that side? Other than that, I mean, we don't know yet about the interoperability, if that is going to be important or not. We assume this is not key for adoption because, in the Hedera ecosystem, we speak of DeFi Spring now. So we most probably will be the first DeFi protocol, lending and borrowing protocol on Hedera. So it's just started now, the DeFi Spring. So we're happy to be in the place where we are.
It's really difficult to find Hedera engineers. When you try to upscale the team at some point of time, how do you plan or think of achieving that?
It's actually quite simple. So we have good team of engineers that we work since many years. So these are smart people, and if you say that's something important, I mean, clearly they're curious, they want to know. So that's not a problem at all. But the bigger challenge is, okay, until you understand the infrastructure, it takes some time. So basically, it's more of a business problem than finding people or understanding, because it's tech. You can understand it, you can learn it. There's documentation, everything. So it's more the decision. Okay, do we onboard 10 more engineers, and there's time involved until they are agile in that environment, and once we've done that, do we have enough work to keep them busy for a couple of years? I'm exaggerating. It'd be nice to have a year pipeline filled. Yeah. So basically, it's the first time that you invest until to understand when will it be paid off.
Absolutely makes sense. And I mean, maybe let's dig deeper on the technical side of things, right? You have basically forked to some extent and adopted the so-called Liquity protocol from Ethereum, and had, of course, to make a lot of changes or some changes. Would you mind putting us through what you did, what you changed, what was challenging? Just,
It's very interesting or important that you mentioned that. So clearly what we said is, we don't want to invent borrowing from scratch. There are good solutions. Liquity in particular, we find is a very good solution for several reasons. Also because it has a great success. We know the founders, they supported us also. We see that it hasn't been exploited. I think that's super key. It hasn't been exploited for a long time. So that's super important. And I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel if somebody has built something very, very, very rock solid, and borrowing protocols need to be solid, in my opinion. So that's that. So if you know that, you also probably understand that we said, we try to change as little as possible. We changed really, really like almost nothing. So what we did, clearly we had to change some details because it's the Hedera token standard. So you can't, use EVM stuff, but we changed as little as possible. That's the thing that we changed. And the other thing that we changed, we use different oracles, because on Hedera, that's also another thing. The oracles just started to pop up. So we have now 2 other oracles but it's just basically, it's also 2 oracles. And so we have other oracles. And I think the most important point is Liquity enables user to mint a synthetic US dollar, and we enable users to borrow a synthetic Swiss franc currency. So that's the two main things: is the HTS standard implementation and having a different currency. That's it. But we try to keep it as close to the original as possible, and that's also very, very well. Like every single change has been documented in the repository. So if you're techie and geeky, you can check, and it's, my opinion, very well documented, and it's been audited. Like Liquity has been audited twice or three times, I think, and we have also been audited. So we are very confident that the fact that we try to change as little as possible makes it as solid as possible.
I love that approach because it drastically, as you mentioned, reduces the risk of exploitation and also reduces engineering costs, right? Getting started, time to market.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a good point. But I mean, we're on an exploratory path, and the risk factor, I think, is much more important. So if you think, who we're addressing, we're like in the long game. Clearly, if you're addressing enterprises, this technology is still like, we've never touched it, and then you have to think about red ocean strategy or blue ocean strategy, where in a blue ocean strategy, you work in a zero competitive market, and in a red ocean strategy, you compete in an existing market. So we enter a place where there is no DeFi borrowing protocol yet there, and most probably enterprises have never used it. So in terms of strategic adoption, how can you foster this adoption? Clearly, risk is a topic that you absolutely have to address, and that is also an important factor. We are talking to several organizations. I think it's no secret that we are having a value at risk modeling about being studied. So there's people studying a value at risk. These are tools that will help decision maker in their language to adopt a new tool, and then it's a business decision. It's not like, it's a new technology, what is it? And if I might talk about the good old times, I remember when I made the first smart contract for the United Nations ever. That was, I think, 2017, and clearly back then, it was like, that technology is it's bad for the environment, it's illegal, and the other organizations that I was talking to and bringing the adoption back in 2017, they were like, I can bring this into my organization only because I'm 6 months away from my retirement. So they're not going to kick me out of my career because I'm doing something so radical. Back then, it was really, really radical. That has changed a bit. Nevertheless, it still is a big challenge for organization, to say, okay, let's try it, let's find out, particularly if you have not much pain, if your business is running smooth, it's like, it's all good, it's easier to fine tune existing processes and, reduce costs and so on. And the tool that we're offering is special for enterprises. Nevertheless, personally, I'm very optimistic that we will have adoption from bottom up, users that will most probably adopt earlier because they take a decision today. 2 hours later, they just go to the front end that someone built and use it. Whereas enterprises, they go to budget process, decision making, maybe some internal politics, and then probably a pilot phase. And so we will have adoption from both sides. And I think what is interesting also is that the protocol is built to reward early adopters more than late adopters. So it's an exponential decay of the reward. So I think that is very interesting in terms of game theory. It's like, okay, let's reward the early adopters for a time, and then just to jump back to the potential enterprise view on things. If you change or bring in new processes, clearly it's also about company culture and change management, and what you move and shake there. So I think what we built can be interesting, and we're very optimistic. And also we think it is it solves a bump, a basic urgent market problem, and these bumps, these basic urgent market problems are usually, the connecting dot between a current state and the future state. So if you have a bump, that stops the transition, and the bump clearly is, I mean, that there is no borrowing protocol on Hedera, and this is, it's, for me personally, it's a no-brainer. You have an asset, the H bar, and it's idling. Why not borrow, like use a borrowing protocol and have the elementary blockchain primitive or DAG primitive that you can build on top, and then clearly the stuff that definitely will be built on top can be, very exotic. It can be high risk, high reward. But what we're doing is really something very elemental, something very fundamental. Everybody can understand it, and it should be, and hopefully it will be, the foundation to build stuff on top.
Quick intermission. If I could ask you for one single favor, it would be that you hit subscribe onto this channel, because it helps our channel more than you can imagine. And the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests get. So thank you very much for watching, and let's continue with the episode. A couple of interesting things now, and one thing that I would like to dig deeper in a little bit is like how you plan to create demand or attract demand, basically. You said
yeah. It's a good question. Yeah. I mean, so there's different things about that. So basically, we built a piece of software, and it's out there, and that's also something that has been very it's been taking a lot of energy for us as a company, and it's out there. We will go live in, I think, now 12 days or something, and then we will celebrate, and then we will take a retreat where we look into what's the next step for the company, because that can clearly be something that is a task. I say, now as a company we have this product, and basically it's immutable, it's out there. Should we foster this product? Should we think about other product? Should we be a service provider as a company, and sell hours from the learning that we have had in this? That's all questions that we haven't answered yet. And I think also in terms of other implications, I don't know if we actually should, create demand, because what we do is we just build a piece of software in a GitHub, and from that, we don't touch it anymore. So basically we built a piece of software. So we haven't thought deeply about, well, we have thought about how we could create the demand or things like that, but it's not something that we have taken a decision as a company internally, or to rephrase it. Of course, we are a company, we're registered in Switzerland, everything, but currently we're still very startup groove. So it's a team. We're friends, and we grind and we bootstrap. So that clearly will also be a question. How do we transition from a startup to a scale up, and how will that impact decision making process and governance within the organization? So that I assume will also be transformative experience, depending also on the success. If we manage to look billions like Liquity did on Ethereum, that will change people's ego more than if we have just a couple of dozen millions.
Absolutely makes sense. What I'm a little bit curious about is, like, the target group for Hedera is completely different to Ethereum. Right? You have a different mindset, you have different people, organizations operating there. Did you, and if so, how did you evaluate, like, if this is actually something? For me, it makes sense.
We made a very intensive study, a very long study, and the data is available. So we have qualitative and quantitative data, and the quantitative data is available on Linktree/Swisscoast. So I invite everybody to go there. It's a very long study, and it has nice pictures of Switzerland. I think that mustn't be underestimated. But yes, so we did evaluate, and basically a lot of the stuff that I mentioned earlier is also some of the learning. That it's interesting, it's an opportunity, but nobody can make promises or sign or have an LOE, particularly because it was just a study, like a questionnaire. So I'm in touch with organizations. One organization I'm in touch since a long time now, and they seem to be very interested. And then I have very personal, and that this is not team opportunity, this is not team view, but my personal view is I'm overly confident that gaming will be a big driver of adoption, because the masses are there, and clearly, with the Swiss franc being, a very stable currency for decades, the US dollar lost 50% in the last 23 years, the Japanese yen lost 66% in the last 23 years, and the euro lost also 66% in the last 17 years. So the Swiss franc has this halo and this credibility in terms of, it's a stable crisis currency. And as a person, I coach startups from Southern America, and they're like, oh wow, great, can we combine it with gaming? Even better. So I think if you think big numbers, that could be an adoption that I see coming. If in gaming you're like my son, he's very much into gaming and the assets in gaming. And we mustn't forget also Vitalik was, he invented Ethereum because, of gaming. So I see a big potential for adoption there. Clearly it will be micro transactions. I also see potential adoption in loyalty programs, and that maybe I'm in my bubble and I see it because I'm active in these spaces. But I see this could be a very interesting opportunity. And then in terms of the big volumes, that's also the discussion we have internally. I think, there will be a time mid to long term where big institutional organizations with large volumes, particularly the ones that are active in the space in Hedera, say, why not do a pilot about treasury management and I can do active treasury management. I don't need to do it with my bank and call the guy at the bank and say, do that. And that's also, for us as blockchain people, it's like a no-brainer, 24/7. Sure, I do it, I click it, it happens. Sure, there's no settlement and it's atomic swap. And for people who are in the Web2 space, for them, it's an eye opener. And so I think it solves a bump. And that's why I'm confident mid to long term there will be an option. I've always been very early in adopting technology, so I think again I'm probably we are early with this project, but I think it's a good thing.
In the use case you mentioned, GameFi and loyalty programs, I'm just thinking out loud. This is usually something where all these EVM people are working on most of the time. At least that's what
But
so
yeah. Sorry if I interrupt you because I already have no figures in my mind. So I'm currently involved in a game. So my son's company just did a game with the biggest Swiss retailer. So with basically, the better you are in the game, the cheaper you can shop, and the more you shop, the better you're in game. So it really brings people together. And I think the numbers that are public is 14 minutes screen time, and I can't remember the other one if it's public or not. But like, amazing numbers. You can't put that on chain. It's like you have the boosters, you have the lives, you have all that, and so there's no way you can do that on an EVM, and that's just Switzerland, which is a really small market. So there's no way, because the volume is really massive. And clearly, I also say this because this is a key reason why we use Hedera. I think people underestimate the power of gaming. It's like 240 million play Candy Crush every day. Imagine these numbers, and they play then maybe 10, 20 levels. Maybe it's a difficult level, they play one level, but they do 20, 30 seconds, like on the morning in the train, in the evening in the train, and maybe once on the toilet. So the numbers are massive, and you need an infrastructure who can carry that load.
Well, that's the story of blockchain, right? Or DLT in general. So everyone is struggling with that. That absolutely makes sense. So your thesis basically is that every project that is currently just on public blockchains will at some point have to migrate to Hedera, or they will either not be able to grow, to scale, or vanish. Or what's your thought on that?
I haven't thought about this. So I wouldn't say yes to your answer. So I mean, I do think that, and I also don't know what the future brings in terms of other infrastructures. Clearly, quantum computers, other topic, also very important. I see it a bit differently. So what I do know is, like, if you want to do enterprise stuff, it works with Hedera. That's the only thing that I know, and I don't have ideas about other stuff. So, and there's great infrastructures out there. I love a lot of the stuff that is out there, Polkadot and Cosmos and Mutable X and all, Base and the nice zero knowledge proof stuff that's happening. So it's all out there. It's great stuff, and I also think it is possible to have a lot of different infrastructures out there. It's the same, with, maybe I don't. It's not the correct comparison, but like different places have different plugs for electrical power, and there's adapters and stuff. So I don't think there will be one infrastructure that wins.
In the end, nobody knows.
Yeah.
Right. So it's but thank you for that. So I would say let's maybe go back to HLiquity. Just from you guys are not live yet, right, from my knowledge. Right? So it's coming soon.
June 5th. I don't know when this is being aired, but it's June 5th.
So it is already live when this podcast will air. Cool stuff. Well, thinking out loud, like, how does the user flow look like? Like, what's different maybe to these lending protocols that the user already knows? And or is it the same most of the time? Like,
so it's pretty much. I mean, the test page will be, so you can go and play around and get some experiences on the test net and try and break stuff. I think will be out in the next either hours or days. So that's something that I recommend. Just play around and see what it does. From my understanding, it's pretty similar. Basically, you decide on the collateralization ratio, which has to be at least 110%. You bring the amount of collateral, and then you can mint the HCFS, which is Swiss currency. When you have that, that's the first step. With that, you can do a lot of things. You use it as the currency, and you can use it into other protocols where where you put it into Monzo, which is a Aave fork that will be live also very soon on Hedera, or you use it for payments or whatever. So you use it as a currency, or you put it into a stability pool. And basically that will be the next kind of interface where you say, okay, I want to use it for a stability pool, and there is some advantages. If you have it in the stability pool, you will earn HLiquity yield. With the HLiquity that you get for having it in the stability pool, you can stake it in a staking pool. So there's like three phases. First is bringing the collateral and minting the HCHF. Second is like, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to use it, or do I put it in the stability pool? And the third step is, what do I do with the HLiquity that I get from the stability pool? You can stake that as well. So there's basically three phases that you can do. And again, there is many opportunities when you have a Swiss franc. Clearly, I haven't calculated the figures yet, but like, there is a reason that Forex is such a big market, and why not map it, have Swiss franc and US dollars in pools, and basically profit from these vibrations in these markets that are always changing, and just having it sit there and have it on have trading fees from these pools. So that's basically decisions that people can do. And again, we are just building the code on GitHub. Block, a Swiss company, is building a frontend, luckily enough. So we're happy that they're building a frontend. We're pretty sure there will be forks of that frontend as well. So there will be, and that's what happened in Liquity on Ethereum, and we assume similar mechanisms will happen on Hedera. But in terms of user interface, like Block is very experienced from what we see in building interfaces, make them foolproof. And things have changed a bit, but again, talking about the good old times where people got lucky because they were drunk or stoned in front of a computer and clicked something right and bought Bitcoin for $1 or something, and I think so. I think different things. The power of an idea or the power of a product is strong if it can explain it at 3:00 in the morning, drunk in a bar. So and I think we have that, and also the front end will be, from what I see now, similar. So basically, it's like, okay, you have H-bar, why not bring it somewhere and get a Swiss franc? And I think I could explain that drunk to another drunk person at 3:00 in the morning. And I think that's the power of strong ideas, that you can convey them on a very simple. And clearly, there's high complexity in it, and you can look at it from a game theoretical point of view. I'm smart. I'm not that smart. But yeah.
That's always what the smartest people say, usually. So,
not to scare others off. Yeah. No, I studied physics, and I think I love physics. And then I tried to do a PhD in finance, and then I stopped my study in finance because I thought, well, yeah, you use figures, but you use figures to prove stuff that you want to prove. It's not like, you cannot go and test it and throw a stone and see, okay, it derives there because I calculate the derives there. It's like there's so many, what is it called? Rats, riskiest assumption to be true that have to happen. So like, you have a theory, but there's so many stuff that has to happen in physics. Like, you calculate it, that's what happens until quantum physics came and stuff like that. But like in finances, and that's also for us, like I think what we build is very, very interesting. Maybe there's a black swan event that will make this explode. Maybe there will be a slow transition. We don't know. We'll find out. But why did we end up here? Yeah, because about how smart people say they're smart or not. So I think there's also different ways of smartness. I like to be analytical. I like to try and study stuff. And if I can make a quick excursion, and then you interrupt me if you think it's not part of this podcast, is basically I think you have two sets of problems. You have complicated problems and complex problems. A complicated problem is like building a nuclear power plant. You need a good plan, you need the experts, you need know-how. It's complicated, but you can do it, right? And you need to know before you act. And there's complex problems. That's a different set of problems, like nature reserve. You have too many flies, you bring in the frogs, and they create problems. So it's chaotic. Or a relationship, with a person. You cannot say, if I say this, that will happen. It's dynamic, it's chaotic. So you have two sets of problems: complicated. You need plans, expertise, and complex. There, you need experience. Expertise doesn't help because it's always different. And these two sets of problems need different approaches to solve it, And particularly, I don't know the English words, like some mindsets are lage-oriented, we call it. Like some people, they say, okay, I want to understand before I act. And these are the people you need for complicated problems, to build the nuclear plant. They need to understand it. You don't do agile project development in building a nuclear plant. On the other side, in complex problems, you need people who are doing iterations, small steps, then they learn, and from their learning, they build the next steps. And I think if we look at the world, and society, and also, the financial system currently, it's not a complicated problem. It's a complex problem. It's a lot of interaction. It can be chaotic. It has tilting points. So coming back to that, I think, maybe it doesn't help to be very smart and analytical, because you cannot predict. It is a chaotic system with different statuses. So it's good to make small step, learn from, build on other people's shoulders. And that's what we've chosen to do with Liquity, building on Liquity protocol, building HLiquity. Is okay, this is the next step, is this going towards the right direction to build an ecosystem that helps empower organizations and people. The Swiss franc has been the most stable currency for decades. And we bring a Swiss franc currency on Hedera. Hedera, the infrastructure for enterprises where we can do trillions of transactions. And the foreign exchange, the biggest market in the world, needs an on-chain Swiss franc.
I mean, in the end, it's a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And I definitely agree the financial system is very complex, right? On one day something happens and everyone screams, runs in circles, and nobody knows what's going to happen. So that absolutely makes sense. And looking at, what all you just mentioned with HLiquity, Aave being forked onto Hedera as well right now. Why now? When we talk about complex systems, why now? Because Hedera is there for quite some time.
I don't know the answer for sure. I have some assumptions. So, I mean, clearly the ecosystem build was a bit slower. Wallets came a bit later, exchanges came a bit later. So we have these primitives, and now we're ready for the next primitives, which are the Lightning and Rotor protocols. And also, I think we must really say that the Hashgraph Association and the HBAR Foundation, they're doing amazing work, in identifying solid projects, in fostering them, in creating an environment that you have the breadth to build, and I think that is also an important factor. I mean, the Hashgraph Association managed to raise, I think, 185 millions in Saudi Arabia and another 50 millions in Abu Dhabi, where clearly you have strong signals that there are stakeholders that believe in the long-term futures of building on top of it, in addition to the brands, clearly but I think, why now? That is one thing. Also, the other thing is the work of the Hashgraph Association and other stakeholders in the space. Also, I think the willingness of bigger stakeholders to say, well, we've observed this space a bit, the ETFs are coming, we can go the next step in the enterprise on-chain spaces.
Well, Toni, then I have one last question for you, because you have been in the DLT space for a very long time. And what were some of your biggest learnings all over the years, mistakes that you don't want to repeat or want others not to repeat? What can you share?
I think it's an uphill battle, really. As the biggest challenge is, I'm in for the game because it brings transparency and efficiency, right? So I think that's the biggest tool, and clearly it empowers individuals. So there's a lot of things that, in business, why transparency, why efficiency? Nobody wants that. So that's a big problem.
Sure.
So that's an uphill battle that we fight. So to solve that problem, we clearly identify the strategy that you address the challenger in the industry. You don't go to the guy at the top, but the challenger who has a competitive advantage if he offers transparency and efficiency. So that's one problem that I discovered, and also one way to cope with it. In terms of retail, one of the biggest challenges that I see, and I've always seen again, is again, we humans are trapped in our body, and our body is of course, we're intellectual, we argue, we have reasons, but deep down, it's like, oh, this is a story. Oh, like when greed kicks in, you switch off your brain, and that's why meme coin explodes, and I have very mixed feelings on that, because I think, greed doesn't bring added value to society, And if we had a different economic system where, greed would be beneficial to the planet, one way would be like, okay, if you accumulative positive impact, when you're rich, you have made more impact, that would be a solution to the problem. So I think I haven't found a way to fight greed. And usually when you come with good arguments and you have another project, that is with a good story, usually the good story wins. It's a bit sad. So I think it's important to add, if you're in the space and you work also to make people not just understand what you're building and the quality of what you're building, but also to make people see the opportunity and there's small tricks in business that you can use for doing that. Is like, when you address this opportunity to do an enterprise, like they think risk and stuff like that, and then you say, okay, what needs to come true to make it happen? And then they formulate it in a positive way. So there's small tricks where you can address stakeholders, but greed is really a challenge in the space, and it's also, it's bad for the reputation. I mean, if you see meme coin funds popping up now, it makes me sad a bit, because I think there's so much more to the technology that it could add more. That there's other amazing projects out there, where you can see, oh, this really adds to the ecosystem. It brings transparency and efficiency, and it has such a good positioning, but they don't have a story, or they don't have charismatic people. That's the other thing, charismatic leaders that like. Clearly, Vitalik is a very special person, and is and the whole genesis of it. It's like this one prodigy son that invited it, but we forget, that his mother is also very important in his story, and I think his mother and his grandmother both were in the computer industry as well, and of course they supported it. So to come back to your question, it's like problems that I've seen is like this greed stuff. It can be an opportunity if you combine it with solid stuff, and I think storytelling should be part of generating attention. And that's the last thing, is like, that's not necessarily connected to DLT, and everybody's fighting for attention, so it's an attention ecosystem. And so usually the loudest and the most negative voices get the attention. There's names for these systems. That's a bit sad. I have no solution for that, but I do think, and that's the positive end. It's like, in our brain, sometimes we're still like children, and children learn when they play. And that's also why I think, gamification is super key. It's like, oh, a game, how can I hack it? How can it be better? And how can I gamify that? And I think, and I'm pretty optimistic that on top of Liquity, there will be, gamified stuff where stuff will happen. Maybe that's before enterprise adoption, maybe later, but I think this has a very strong potential, because it directly talks to our brains, and because as children, it's like, oh, a new toy I want to play, right?
Well, business is a complex game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
I think we basically just need to, when you say greed, meme coins, all these things, it's in some way, if we look at it, maybe just unavoidable. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm not judging.
Yeah.
I'm a very keen observer of the space, and it's like, oh wow, and also to see, and to understand, like, oh, why does this have so much, attention, and what's and you're right, it's a complex game. Basically, meme coins are also a game. It's like, okay, why, what's the race? And another friend of mine, like, he's an analyst from big enterprise. He said, if something moves, people start to bet on it. So whatever moves, people will start to bet on it, because it's in our age, like, oh, who wins, things like that. And it's interesting as an observer. It's a bit harder if you're trying to build a rock solid business and you're associated with that. So the disconnect is important to say, well, look, there's that, but there's also other stuff, and it really brings added value. But I'm still very confident that both worlds can be true. There can be meme coins, and people will, the longer the more, understand that the technology is more than that.
At least it's somewhat of a gateway for many people, right? Yeah. Most people came in for the money and stayed for,
yeah, absolutely. Very good point. Yeah. If I might switch the roles, it's like for me, well, when you hear me talking about HLiquity, what is the thing that you think could be interesting about HLiquity, or why do you think, or how do you position it? As like, oh, it's a niche product on a niche chain, or how do you see it? Because you see so many things, and you're an expert and a keen observer of the space. So how do you position, very honestly, HLiquity in the current space, and what do you see for the future?
Well, if I think if I can say that, from my understanding, I think it comes down to the target group, right? Hedera is very deep on enterprise, and DeFi is very much focused in general on retail. So I think that's maybe, I would dare to say, the major obstacle. And then introducing compliance, KYC, and these things that might be needed, then maybe just contradicts the overall value of having some kind of a DeFi protocol there.
Yeah.
So that's maybe the major issue I see. So in the end, it might be all about efficiency and transparency, not at all about decentralization. And that sparks the discussion if one couldn't just do a couple of things off-chain anyway to further improve efficiency and, depending on how it's done, transparency. So that's kind of, I think, the tipping point for me. But you're definitely deeper in the Hedera space than myself. So
it's very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing this. Yeah.
I'm definitely keen to see where HLiquity is going. And yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Same. Yeah. Thanks, Toni. And thanks everyone for watching. Oh, did you like this session? I certainly did. Hope you guys did as well. So thank you very much for watching and for making it to the end especially. So if I can ask you for one single favor, please like this video. And yeah, it really helps us more than you can imagine. Leave a comment, subscribe, anything, every engagement helps. And yeah.
WaveAct, the web-free software company that understands what you want.